So I would like to bring up Monica Simpson, the CEO, Executive Director of Sistersong, and my good friend, tonight that she is going to moderate this panel. And I just want to bring some wonderful words about this powerful and dynamic, courageous, queer, Black, North Carolina native woman who has been organizing against human rights abuses, the prison industrial complex, systemic violence against Southern Black women and LGBTQ people. She's a proud graduate of the historically Black Johnson C. Smith University, where she earned a bachelor's in communications and organized for LGBTQ rights on and off campus. She became the operations director and the first person of color at the Charlotte Lesbian and Gay Community Center. She trained Black youth in activism, philanthropy, and fundraising as the Ujamaa coordinator for grassroots leadership. In 2010, she moved to Georgia, my home state, to be the development coordinator and was promoted to deputy coordinator in 2011, and then assumed the interim executive director in 2012, and she ultimately became the executive director in 2013. She is a nationally sought-after facilitator, speaker, and organizer. She's the only woman among the 4 founders of Charlotte's, North Carolina, Black Gay Pride Celebration, the first in the Bible Belt, which has received awards from the National Black Justice Coalition and the Human Rights Coalition for its incredible launch with 7,000 participants. She's been featured in many publications for her activism and has written many articles on LGBTQ issues, the over-policing of Black and Brown communities, philanthropy, and Southern activism. In 2014, she was named a civil rights leader by Essence magazine, and in 2015 was chosen as a panelist for the Women of the World Summit. And I'm just learning something new. She's also a full circle doula certified through the International Center for Traditional Childbirth, and she serves on the boards of the Fund for Southern Communities and the legendary Highlander Center. She's also an artist, a singer, a spoken word artist, and has appeared in theatrical productions such as For the Love of Harlem, Words to Isms, Walk Like a Man, The Vagina Monologues, and For Colored Girls. We are so happy to have her moderate our panel, and I'm going to turn it over to Monica.
Thank you so much, Abeni, and peace and greetings to everybody that's on this call tonight. I am super excited for this conversation. It seems extremely timely, and something that I'm really excited to do is to just be here with all of my homies and comrades that I get to do this work with every single day, fighting for reproductive freedom in this country. I also just want to say it's always weird to hear your bio being read because, you know, the journey is real, but it's also very, very unnerving. But I appreciate you, Abeni, and we're really grateful that you all see this conversation as important enough to be able to have a town hall for us to dig into the issues and to talk about what's really going on right now. I want to also take a moment to introduce some of you, or maybe reintroduce to some of you, the reproductive justice movement and framework. We are celebrating 30 years as a movement this year. In 1994, 12 powerful Black women came together to name this movement of reproductive justice. And we have been moving and shaking and organizing and growing as a movement now for 30 years. And so this is also an important time for us to talk about that history as we are now thinking about what the world is about to look like and what are we doing to ensure that we are moving towards liberation. And that is exactly what this reproductive justice framework is rooted in, a liberation-focused mindset and moving our communities towards living their best lives and to be able to have the control that they want over their own bodies, their families, and their futures. There are 4 tenets to the reproductive justice framework, as Sistersong defines it: the human right to have the children that we want in the ways that we want, to prevent or end pregnancies without shame but with dignity, and to be able to parent our children in healthy and safe environments and to make sure that folks are able to have their human right to bodily autonomy. And that's what we're going to dig into tonight. But before we dig into that and these incredible panelists that we have gathered for you all, we have a very, very important person on, a person who has been at the forefront of this fight for reproductive freedom and the forefront of our fight for so much of our civil rights, human rights in this country. And I am grateful to have been able to work beside this powerful and fearless leader. And I'm so glad that we get to have her on tonight to help us frame this conversation. Our very own Congresswoman Barbara Lee is in the building, and we would love to just take a moment to just shoot it over to you, our dear Congresswoman. Thank you so much for being in tonight, and we are so excited to hear from you this evening.
Thank you so much. It's really a nice moment for me, a good break from Capitol Hill to be with all of you who are for real and authentic and really showing up each and every day for reproductive freedom, which of course is part of our democracy, we thought. You know, it's really a pleasure to be with you, movement leaders, educators, innovators, reflecting on the milestones achieved through relentless, and I mean relentless activism, from the Voting Rights Act of 65 to Roe versus Wade and more movements. I also want to give a special thank you to the Center for Popular Democracy, Chromatic Black, and 2024 and beyond, creating a shared future for coming together to open this important dialogue to increase awareness around reproductive justice issues. And they do need to be framed as justice issues. And, you know, I co-chair the Congressional Pro-Choice Caucus, and I've been working on this issue for a long time. And it's really exciting to see how far reproductive justice has come, but it's really a shame and disgrace that the clock is being rolled back. But we cannot let that happen. And thanks to you, I know we're going to stop this backward trend and forge ahead. I was a staffer for the great late Congressman Ron Dellums, a Democrat representing then California's 9th Congressional District, when Representative Henry Hyde attached his insidious amendment to the federal budget for the first time, the Hyde Amendment. I was shocked that soon after Roe versus Wade established the legal right to abortion, Representative Hyde sought to stop that right from low-income women who are primarily Black and brown women. We now have the most women and women of color in Congress in history, and that has really translated to creating a pro-choice Congress. And thanks to the countless hours of organizing and advocacy for women and by women, especially women of color from across the country, we are making progress just in repealing the Hyde Amendment. I just have to share this with you. When I first came to Congress, when I was a staffer, first of all, I just knew one day I was going to take on this fight. I didn't know how, when, and where. When I came to Congress, I took it on from day one. But there was so much pushback from, of course, our powers that be. And I was told not even bother. It was too controversial to gain any support. But look at where we are now. This Congress, my equal access to abortion coverage and health insurance, that's the EACH Act, which repeals the Hyde Amendment, has got 185 co-sponsors. This Congress so far under a GOP-controlled House. And so even in the minority, we're forging ahead. And so thank you all for your help in this, because also, and you know, the Hyde Amendment is in the appropriations bill. Well, when we were in the majority, I was able to, and this was hard, but with your help, keep it out of the appropriations bill for 2 years. So we moved this bill off of the House floor into the Senate without the Hyde Amendment. Never in history, or at least since the Hyde Amendment has been in law, have we had that movement. And so we're ready. We just have to do the politics, because we know that reproductive justice isn't just a racial justice issue. It's also an economic one. Women of color comprise the majority of Medicaid enrollees and rely on Medicaid for reproductive health care coverage at higher rates than their white peers. We understand the economic disparities in this country and where the impact and the unfortunate disparities occur. That's with women of color and Black women. Any restriction on access to abortion care through Medicaid disproportionately affects low-income women and women of color. These disparities, they're endless and limited not just to the United States. As the top-ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Foreign Operations, I have fought to expand access to care on the global stage as well. I'm also the sponsor of the Global Health Empowerment and Rights Act. This bill would repeal, and you know, the global gang rule, which represents non-U.S. organizations receiving U.S. global health funding to choose between receiving U.S. resources or providing essential health care to their patients. It's like an international hide of it. Again, a shame and disgrace. My own personal experience with abortion and abortion before Roe versus Wade informs my work each and every day to make sure that we don't go back there. I remember those days very well. I remember going from California, where it was illegal, to Texas, where it was illegal and Jamaica, and where it was illegal, and terrified, first of all, that I might die because the highest rate of death at that point for women and girls was sepsis as it relates to abortions. And in fact, I knew that it was illegal. I could have been arrested in Mexico, in Texas, or in California. So let me tell you, it was a back alley, and I'll always remember that night. But I survived. By the grace of God, I survived. But let me tell you, I don't intend to let us get back to those days. And even before coming to Congress, as an elected official, I led efforts in the California State Legislature by authoring California's first Violence Against Women Act and passing laws to increase penalties for illegally blocking abortion clinics. And the Republican governor, show you how things have gotten even worse. A Republican governor signed both of my bills into law in California. Since Roe fell, right-wing extremists have succeeded in creating a landscape of overlapping and sometimes contradictory restrictions on abortion care, forcing providers to double as lawyers or risk being vulnerable to legal retaliation for doing their jobs. Now, legitimate clinics are forced to close their doors while anti-abortion disinformation centers are bolstered with GOP-provided tax dollars. Our work in Congress means much more now than ever with a radical, corrupt Supreme Court. That's why House Democrats are fighting to pass bills like the Women's Health Protection Act, which enshrines the protections of Roe into federal law. Alongside the pro-choice caucus co-chair, Diana DeGette, and Congresswoman Judy Chu, I recently led the charge in filing a discharge petition to force then Speaker Kevin McCarthy to hold a vote on the Women's Health Protection Act. But this fight is much, much larger, as you know, than partisan politics. It's about the fundamental human right of accessible, affordable health care, no matter your gender, race, or income. And I'm not going to stop fighting for this wherever I am. I want to thank you all for doing the same, and just know that this is a justice issue. It's an economic issue. It's an issue of democracy. This is the first time a constitutional right has ever been taken away. And it's the time that our coalition continues to broaden our impact and with our alliances. And I want to thank you all for keeping the movement alive and well and making it even stronger so that we can win again and never allow them to turn the clock back. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. It is always an honor to hear you speak. I'm grateful that you brought in the history. Thank you for bringing in your vulnerability and why this issue was so important to you as a personal issue, and to let us know what is really moving from the global to the domestic ways in which all of this work is just continuing to build and grow around the world. And so thank you for your service. Thank you for being our champion. And thank you for being on with us tonight, because we know it's your voice and it's voices like yours on Capitol Hill that makes it possible for all of us to do the work that we do every single day. So thank you so much again. We can give all the love in the chat to our Congresswoman Barbara Lee and all the work that she is doing for us. And we are going to now switch over to some folks who are doing the work on the ground too. We're going to bring in some more perspectives. And you're going to hear from folks tonight that are talking about this work from a reproductive health, rights, and justice perspective, right? Because there are three different sectors that really make up this reproductive freedom work. And so you're going to be hearing about that from these very different perspectives and people using different strategies in the field. And ultimately, we're going to be talking about the impact that this Project 25 has on our work. I also want to say one last thing. I'm actually going to be co-facilitating tonight with the amazing Kimberly Inez McGuire from Erasure. And so she will be coming on at about 7:45 or so to pick up and take on the hosting for the rest of the call. So I'll be with you all for as long as I can, but I'm ready to get things started if you all are ready to get things started. So tonight I'm going to bring in our very first speaker. Fatima Graves is the CEO of the National Women's Law Center. She is a powerful, fearless leader as well. Every time I'm in her presence, I learn something new. And I think that she is one of the most brilliant people that I have ever met in my life. And she is fighting every single day through her organization and through her work to ensure that our reproductive rights, that they're not being left behind. So Fatima, my first question for you tonight is, could you highlight some of the key strategies outlined in Project 25 to restrict access to abortion and reproductive health care? And what does that really mean for you and your work?
Well, I have to begin with so much gratitude that this conversation is happening. And how lucky am I to do this with my sister here? So really glad to be with you, Monica. And so we should take a step back and just understand that Project 2025 is really steeped in a white Christian nationalist view of married heterosexuality is the only public form of sexual expression. Forced pregnancy is okay. An instruction basically throughout to use all available federal authority to end abortion access, to erase trans folks from public life. And feminism, gender, those are bad words. So you have to have that as a backdrop to understand how they are proposing not just doing many of the things that are more likely to happen when conservatives are in power, but to go further. The energy and flexing they have in the wake of Dobbs is a new brand. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few areas to pay attention to, but I just think keep returning to that backdrop is really important. So first of all, they are trying to enshrine personhood wherever they can to extend, rights to embryos and fetuses rather than those who are pregnant. So you see it show up not just when you look at the section on health and human services, you see it show up through every agency having that specific mandate. And indeed, they propose withdrawing the task force where coordination was happening on reproductive health and instead replacing it with a task force devoted to fetal life. And so that level of coordination across agency is being proposed. The second thing I just want to say is that you may have been following the two cases before the Supreme Court, the case around mifepristone or medication abortion and the case around emergency medical care. Each of those cases are really challenging Biden administration decisions, the FDA approval of medication abortion, the Biden administration guidance and reminders around hospital and emergency room requirements to provide emergency medical care to pregnant people who need it. It is not just that they seek to undo those things. They're very clear about that. They seek to go further. And if you have been tracking the details of the emergency medical care argument, you saw that they said, actually, it is not that there are any rights to emergency care for pregnant people in the law. Actually, it's a demand that you preserve fetal life in the law is what they're arguing. So they propose that the statute be interpreted that way. They also go through a range of ways basically that are designed to undermine and stop interstate travel. right? Using the Department of Justice, but also using the CDC to engage in what they call abortion surveillance, using all manner of government to basically say, well, you cannot travel out of a state that bans abortion, using their authority if they have someone in custody. So they would bring back the approach that they took in the Trump administration, where for those who were in immigration custody, who are unaccompanied minors, where they were not allowing them to have abortion care. And here they would say it would be illegal to, and I don't want to use their language all the time, but I will use it here. So just so you understand, to traffic people across state lines to seek abortion care. So they want to shut down travel. The other thing for you to know, and I know I keep going, but I want people to pay attention to this. They basically are going to try to paint abortion as scary and use arms of the federal government to produce reports based not on data, but that reports that basically say abortion is dangerous. And so that it would have impact in the short run, but really they have a longer game here. So that federal reports would say that. They also are basically in a range of ways going to try to redefine a number of forms of contraception as abortion so that it is swept up in the range of mandates they have. And there are a number of rules. You know, the Congresswoman talked about Hyde and her longstanding advocacy around Hyde. They seek to extend Hyde and actually say, if you want to use your own funding, either private funding or state funding, that you can't. That's on top of all the efforts to do things like defund Planned Parenthood and others who provide a range of care. So I hate to say that this is kind of just touching the tip of the iceberg of the types of things that are in Project 2025. But the bottom line, and that's where I'll go back to where I started, is that they have outlined across each agency and in the White House pathways to shut down the limited abortion access that exists, to make it harder to get care, to make it easier to criminalize people, and to make it harder for people to pay for it. And they have a pretty detailed plan in range of ways to accomplish it. So for us at the Law Center, and for many of the folks who you'll hear from on this call, part of our task is both to understand what they're going to do. And, we had some recent history and practice of how you slow things down. I do want to say they're going to come in flexing if they were to under Project 2025 and sort of say all of these things will happen on day one. And I always want to caution people, because I've been around this town long enough to know that it's very hard for things to happen on day one, really. But what we will have is a combination of people power, the law, and the ability to use a range of tools to slow down their rulemaking. And we will also have, potentially, depending on the outcome, friends in other places in Congress and in states to support us. So that will be a lot of litigation. That will be a lot of rulemaking. That will be a lot of explaining to people when and how to engage. But we should take their plans very, 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 very seriously around how they would for sure seek to end all abortion access. And then the final thing that I will say, if you do like a control fine, you don't see the word Comstock in there. There's been more talk about Comstock. And so if you did, you might say, oh, maybe that's not their plan. They just use other language to describe what they would do at the Department of Justice to revive that in its whole. So if you think it's not in there because you did like a control fine and said, oh, phew, they forgot it, they haven't forgotten.
They haven't. I mean, thank you for that. When I tell you, you broke that down for us in such.
Is that dark?
It's just real. Like, that's what it is, right? I mean, it is dark because our opposition is dark. They work in darkness. And so that it's just real. But to see how meticulous they are, right, with it in the way that you were able to break that down for us really, really helps set the stage. And you said something as you started about this Project 25, really being this white Christian nationalist, agenda. And really that's kind of like at the foundation of this thing. I don't even want to give it a name. It's just a thing, right? And so I want to bring next into the conversation someone who is on the front lines of fighting against this white Christian nationalist agenda, right? Reverend Letitia James, she is the co-director for organizational development of Sacred, the spiritual alliance of communities for reproductive dignity. And Letitia, I know that you are here because, again, this is at the center of you all's work. And you all have been really a leading voice for us in the reproductive justice movement around really developing strategies to fight against this agenda coming from our opposition. So can you speak to the ideologies behind Project 2025, their platform, and share more about the basis of these policies?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Monica, for that introduction. And thank you, Fatima, for talking about the strategies so thoroughly. I'm really excited to be here with all of you and to speak to some of this. So as was already mentioned, the main ideologies behind Project 2025 are that of white Christian nationalism and white Christian supremacy. And to kind of just give a brief definition of what that means, when we talk about white supremacy, we're talking about the belief that white people should constitute a superior race and should therefore dominate society, right? And at the exclusion of and the detriment to other racial and ethnic groups. So when we look at Christian supremacy, it's a global ideology in which Christianity is seen as the religion that should govern all global contexts and interests and is forcibly aligned with the interests of those who hold the most power. So within the US, right, when we localize that, what we get is white Christian nationalism. And it's a movement and a belief that the United States is an inherently Christian nation and that steps should be taken by the government to keep it that way. Ergo, we get Project 2025, right? That this is how they want to keep it that way. They use a lot of coded language under the guise of trying to be unifying, right? That they're trying to, quote unquote, save America and restore the American family. These are actual things that they say within the book and the document. But their policies stem from ideologies that at the end of the day seek to create a Christian nationalist hegemony that has a very narrow definition of how to be, quote unquote, American. The same proponents of Project 2025, they incessantly talk about religious rights being under attack, and that the need for religious freedom is unique to them, right? And so at best, they ignore the existence of religious practices in our country, right? The multiplicity of religious practices. And at worst, they're outright attacking and trying to outlaw other religious practices and beliefs. They want no form of pluralism within our country. And while they are not the majority, what they have been very successful at is dominating the narrative that their religious view is the prevailing and right view when it comes particularly to reproductive freedom, bodily autonomy, gender autonomy. And so when we look at that, right, one thing that I want to highlight in particular that they say in this document is a direct quote. They talk about the noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology and how they should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country, that the theories poison our children, that they're being taught on the one hand to affirm that the color of their skin fundamentally determines their identity and even their moral status, while on the other, they are taught to deny the very creatureliness that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the givenness of our nature as men or women. What does that mean? They are insinuating here that race is constructed, but gender is not because it is biblically citable. So when we start to find policies being based on biblical literalism, as a foundation, then the future of our country's government, everyone should be very deeply concerned about that. Even the people who might hold these religious beliefs. Because what happens when those in power who have decided that these are the beliefs that should be the basis of our government, what happens when they change their mind and they cling to new beliefs? At that point, they would have amassed enough power to be able to change laws on a whim simply because their beliefs have shifted. We know for a fact that unfortunately, because of the trauma that has been enacted by white Christian supremacy and white Christian nationalism, that many of us in progressive movements, right, and leftist movements have either pushed away religion in its entirety, right, or have a lot of disdain for religion, right, and particularly Christianity, which is understandable. But when we push away religion in our movements, we're actually doing the right's work for them. And we're supporting this continued idea that they have the moral high ground and that they're the only ones who can speak to morality and religion. They even go so far as to use our own frameworks against us, such as taking an intersectional approach to how they spread their ideologies. They know firsthand that you do not have to be white and Christian to wear the mask of white Christian nationalism or supremacy. And so they do things like distract us with a blitz of attacks on DEI, and then they use those same principles to get more people invested in their policies. So, for example, let's look at Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor in North Carolina, who we might say is being tokenized, right, by the right, but who leverages the idea of coming from an impoverished background, capitalizes off of being the first Black lieutenant governor in North Carolina, and is excellent talking piece for promise number one in Project 2025, which is to restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect children. Within this promise, they single out Black families using the same tired and recycled welfare queen myth and labeling fatherlessness as one of the principal reasons for crime, poverty, mental illness, and just so much more. They go on to cite in this promise that in order to restore the American family, things like sexual orientation, gender ideology must be deleted. And they posit those foundational beliefs on conservative Christian church as the antidote to issues plaguing many families, including families of color. As somebody who was raised in an evangelical context, I know firsthand the ways that these messages trickle down into Black families and Black communities and Black church communities in particular. And they are the messages we've been indoctrinated with since enslavement, which continue to get regurgitated, such as, like Mark Robinson says, that homosexuality is akin to pedophilia, right? He said something like that multiple times. And what that does is it allows white Christian supremacy to scapegoat what they call woke culture warriors, instead of for why the Black family is disenfranchised, instead of the actual culprit, which is generations of oppression under white Christian nationalism and supremacy.
Whoa. Let me tell you something. You took us to church. I mean, that's what it felt like for me. I don't know about anybody else. But that is, I mean, there were just so many things I wish I could have just like snapped at or like said amen to, because you were just hitting so much on the head and like really helping us see how all of this, what the line through it all, right? And I can't wait for you to like really get in on the rest of these questions with the other folks who are about to come into the room and continue to bring more brilliance and knowledge. I mean, I'm a lucky one, right? I get to do work with these people every single day. I'm feeling really, really lucky. I'm going to now bring into the conversation my co-moderator who will be picking up the moderation after she brings her brilliance into the room. I am just a dear friend of this dear sister, and we do a lot of good work together in so many ways. And tonight, though, I want to introduce to some and present to others Kimberly Inez McGuire. She is the executive director of Erasure, which is United for Reproductive and Gender Equity. We're so excited that you're here tonight, and I'm always excited to do things in partnership with you. Your question tonight, though, Kimberly, because I know that you can help us understand this very, very well. We know that this is a part of a decades-long plan because they've been trying it for a minute. Can you please speak to some of the groups behind this Project 2025 thing and how it relates to attacks on reproductive rights over the past few decades, because this ain't really new, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, they are on their same old bad ideas, let's say. So in terms of who is behind Project 2025, and first, I just want to appreciate everyone who has spoken so far. And Monica, thank you for bringing your spirit into this space. We need that positive energy because of who we are up against. And so who is it? This is the Heritage Foundation. This is a who's who of Trump cronies, Christian nationalists, conservative extremists, and frankly, mediocre white men. And I will say, speaking as a queer Latina single mother, I am really clear that their agenda is one that imagines that I do not exist, and in which my family and the families of so many of us here today have no place. So the roots of their ideology, we know, go back to the founding of this country, rooted in misogyny and anti-Blackness. But we can also speak to the most recent chapter, right, really starting in 2010 with some of the backlash that was grown and built around, you know, the backlash to Obama being president and all of the hatred that came to be and really be unleashed and uncovered during that period. And so what they have done in the intervening years, because what we saw in 2010 was a takeover of state legislatures that in the intervening years saw more than 1,000 abortion restrictions proposed and brought into law, hundreds and hundreds of laws attacking democracy, attacking trans young people. So all of these bad ideas, these bad policies, they've been testing them out in states. And they've also been testing out their strategy to capture and weaponize the executive branch in order to advance their extreme agenda. And while they're pushing all these bad policies, to punish and criminalize free speech, dissent, protest, and democracy. So attacking our families while at the same time weaponizing the government against our ability to fight back. And so they've been trying these things out in places like Georgia and Texas and Ohio, and they're bringing all of that just evil insidiousness into, you know, their plan for the federal government and for effectively the biggest piggy bank they could have access to fund this takeover of our state government. So it is, it's no small thing what they plan to do, but bad news for them. They have to fight with us about it. So I want to bring up some of the other freedom fighters, some of the other incredible leaders who are going to be the folks that Project 2025 is going to have to contend with. And so next we want to bring up Angela Cobain, the Senior Director of Organizing and Partnership with Planned Parenthood Action Fund. And what we'll do for this piece is I'm going to ask one question, but I'm actually going to invite Angela, Ivanna from Florida Rising, Ivanna Gonzalez, Director of Campaigns from Florida Rising, and Nourbese Flint, the President of All Above All. So all three of you, let's see your faces come into the space. We'll start with you, Angela. So looking ahead, right, how can grassroots activism, legal advocacy, and public education help us safeguard our rights against some of these attacks?
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm so honored to be on with Nourbese and Ivanna. And I would say to answer this question, it's really, really all of the above. Project 2025 makes it clear that there's an obsession with controlling our bodies by interfering in our personal medical decisions. I think when I was scanning the report and talking to some of my colleagues, I saw that banning abortion was one of the first promise points, and that the word abortion is mentioned a whopping 199 times throughout its 887 pages. And I will also add that as the daughter of Mexican immigrants, that the obsession with controlling our bodies is also clear in the repugnant plans for immigrants, the detention and deportation of our neighbors, and in my case, my family members. So I think precisely because Project 2025 is a comprehensive attack on our identities, their intersections, our rights, and our person, it's going to take all of the above: grassroots activism, legal advocacy, and public education for us to be able to fight to regain the rights that we've lost, also the ones we've never had, and go beyond towards the world that we want to see. I'm based locally in Denver, Colorado, and so I know that the fight in each state is going to look different, and it's important that we have local folks leading the charge on how to make change in their own communities. I think for us at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, we're doubling down on our patient and provider storytelling, doing what many organizers who we stand on the shoulders of have said in the past of speaking truth to power for our grassroots activism and supporter education. And we're especially doing this now as we're going to start to get decisions from the Supreme Court on all of these cases and also approaching August recess. And I think to close out, I would just say that as the leader of the partnerships team at PPFA, our organization is also very conscious about acting as intentional partners because we're all part of an ecosystem. All of our organizations on the line today are fighting for bodily autonomy, reproductive freedom, and justice. I care about the Keep Our Clinics campaign to support clinics staying open during any ban, case, or ballot measure. And I know that the same people who want to close those clinics are also trying to shut down and defund Planned Parenthood, as Fatima mentioned earlier on the courts, earlier on the call, particularly via federal courts in Texas. We're linked by both a common lucha or a fight. And so by that same token, we're also linked in our liberation. So when I think about what role grassroots activism, legal advocacy, and public education plays, it's the role of us as organizers to center directly and disproportionately impacted people's stories, channel the power of organized people and our collective voice as an ecosystem towards that long-term power building so that we have the fortitude and experience to defeat Project 2025 and the next playbook that comes along, because there will always be one. A pastor who I used to work with once told me that for as long as there's been oppression, there's been resistance. And I think that that's our...
Thank you so much for that beautiful call and for ending us on that note of resistance. It is so important. Well, when we talk about, folks who are resisting, who are up against it, I know so many of us have candles lit for Florida and our incredible comrades who are fighting the fight there. Ivanna Gonzalez from Florida Rising, please talk to us from your perspective and the incredible work that you all are doing in Florida. How can we protect our rights?
That was such a perfect ending, Angela, because I wanted to lead with how in Florida, the danger that they're going to have to contend with is how strong we've become because we are so battle-hardened, right? Not just because of the 15-week ban that they passed, which was a tremendous loss. Now the 6-week ban, which tragically went into effect today in our state. So we're talking about a reality for 84,000 Florida patients that now have 5 weeks and 6 days gestational age as the limit in order to access abortion care with virtually no exceptions. So not just that, but also like tremendous losses at the state level, preemption of housing justice wins at the local level, which undermine our ability to raise the children that we choose to have in safe and sustainable communities. Like that crew are the people that have suffered the losses are the people that are leading this fight. We're leading a campaign for us to win a ballot initiative, a constitutional protection that would end government interference in abortion. And we've really laid the groundwork for this history-making campaign with like years of experience. We did some history-making things in the last couple of months. We validated almost 1 million petitions, of which 250,000 were volunteer collected in 17 districts, far surpassing the requirements of the state that so many people said that we could not meet. And we also qualified with some very strong language at the Florida Supreme Court, despite a court that was seriously stacked against us because of the sheer talent, brilliance, and our righteousness, because we are in the right here. So for Florida's 84,000 patients, grassroots advocacy, policy work, legal campaigns are all sort of coming together in this moment because we have no other choice. It's life and death, and Florida Rising is really proud to be a part of the executive committee of Floridians Protecting Freedom, the campaign for yes on Amendment 4, and we're joined by other really amazing organizations like Voices of Southwest Florida, the Florida Women's Freedom Coalition, SCIU 1199, Planned Parenthood, and the ACLU, of course. And I'll just say one last thing before I pass it back to Kim, which is that for I think for us at Florida Rising, who are really rooted in a racial justice lens, winning this abortion fight is about 84,000 abortion patients in Florida, Black and brown people who will be the most impacted by the loss of care and are being impacted by the loss of care today. And it's also about defanging a wedge issue that has historically been used specifically against Black and brown people to pit us against one another, telling a story that our people do not believe and are not supportive of abortion care, which is a huge lie. So this campaign is both about abortion access and is about defanging this tool that has been used against us in our broader movement as well.
Thank you so much, Ivanna, and just wishing you so much success in the incredibly important work happening in Florida this year. I want to bring in the voice of another one of our incredible comrades in this work, Nourbese Flint, lifelong advocate for reproductive justice and the president and CEO of All Above All and the All Above All Action Fund. Talk to us, Nourbese.
I'm so happy to be here with y'all today and my comrades in the fight for reproductive justice. And then also to be graced with the greatest, with the Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who has been fighting the fight for my entire life. And as a California native, it's just very special. So when I think about the role of activism, I'm thinking about it in two ways. And the first piece is that we can't lose hope. And I'm not saying optimism, I'm saying hope, because the hope is the belief that we can be better, that the world can be better, but we have the ability to shape it. Dreaming and imagining is a core part of successful strategies. And what we've seen with Project 2025 is their wildest imagination and dreams of their plans, of their future. And we need the same tenacity, audacity, and boldness to demand for our communities. And so we cannot lose the piece of where we need to dream and imagine and believe and give that and inspire our hope into the folks that we are organizing in our communities, because that is a core piece. Folks don't want to join folks who are losing. Folks don't want to come over to our team and be and it's going to be fighting is hard. No, the work is hard, yes, but it's also joyful, and we have to bring that piece into the work. The second is that we need everybody on deck. All Above All is an organization. We work very hard on abortion justice, making abortion affordable, available, and accessible for all who need it. We are very excited about the policy pieces, and we are working across the country to make sure that we are pushing and holding our elected officials accountable. But we need y'all help. And that means that we need folks who are using art to get out the word, to using design to vision for new futures that represent our communities. We need to hold our elected officials accountable, both at the ballot box, but also thank our elected officials who are champions and let them know that they are people behind them and they can run and that they can push forward and be bold and that they have a community holding them up. We want to make sure that we are continuously and asking and put our stake in the ground boldly around Hyde, and that this is not a compromise, and that we need to have public funding for abortion access, as well as a ton of other RJ issues. And we can host and get together with our friends. We can join organizations that we align with. There are so many ways that we need to be engaged and that we can be engaged. But what I'm seeing is that this is a sport that we need everybody in. This is a movement that we need everybody in. And so find and connect with an organization. We heard about the dope work that's happening in Florida. You're going to hear about dope work from other folks. There's dope work happening at all. Find an organization that you align with, and let's get down.
The message is clear. We need everybody on deck. Thank you so much, Nourbese. So as you were speaking, it made me think of Adrienne Marie Brown's words, all organizing is science fiction. So these Project 2025 people are trying to build like an evil dystopian future. And it is our responsibility, every single person who is listening, our friends, our neighbors, to build the beautiful, joyful, liberated future in which our families can live and thrive. So I want to bring a couple folks up on deck so we can understand what is this evil dystopia that Project 2025 is trying to build and how are we going to combat it. So I'm going to be bringing up Lupe Rodriquez next, by Hermana La Lucha from the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice. So this Project 2025 is trying to stamp out sex education, and they want to promote risk avoidance. They want to promote the rhythm method. They're not featuring condoms. They're not featuring birth control. It seems like a mess. Can you please talk to us about how their approach, I don't even think we can call it to sex ed, but their anti-sex ed, anti-sex approach, what are the real implications of that for public health, including for the Latina community that you all work with?
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. And hi, all. I'm so happy and honored to be in this company and talking to you all today. I think, when I was thinking about this panel and this conversation about Project 2025, I was taken back to, how all of the things that we've been fighting for a really long time, how they could, be potentially destroyed and taken back through this project, right? Like on everything, as Angela said, as Nourbese said, as Ivanna said, on every single topic in terms of immigrant rights, in terms of access to preventative healthcare, in terms of abortion access, the clawbacks are real in this plan that they have. And I think specifically on this question of preventative healthcare and birth control, there's no question, right, that this Project 2025 plan is extremely, extremely dangerous for our communities and for public health of our entire country and nation and world, really. I think, first and foremost, I want to state the obvious, right, that the rhythm method is a form of birth control that's considered, low risk, but really is, by all medical measures and standards of science, the least effective form of birth control. How well it works pretty much varies from who's doing it and how they use it. But in general, as many as 24 out of 100 people who use natural family planning and the rhythm method for birth control become pregnant in the first year. So its efficacy rate is around 70% or 76%. And, importantly, also, the rhythm method doesn't protect any of us from sexually transmitted infections and, other types of things that could happen when you're having unprotected sex, right? So I think those two things are just top points to make in this conversation. And then furthermore, like our communities, Black, Indigenous, Latina folks, and other communities of color already face persistent barriers and inequities that rob us of the tools that we need to stay healthy and make decisions, sound decisions for ourselves and our families about when to become parents or expand our families or raise our families, with dignity and safety. A couple of things that come up when we're talking about those inequities is that already, we lack regular healthcare access or a regular provider of healthcare because of lack of insurance coverage and other systemic barriers that exist for us. And, although the Affordable Care Act extended healthcare coverage for millions, many BIPOC folks, including immigrants specifically, were barred from insurance coverage due to our immigration status. And so we, as a result, have seen that many immigrants still have the highest rates of not being insured in the U.S. and don't have access to a regular healthcare provider. Our biased and frankly racist healthcare system also has created inequities for our communities that have kept us from having sound access to care. And, for many in the Latina community or other Indigenous communities, language barriers, for folks who don't speak English, language barriers often keep us from regular care as well. And when we do have access to care, that keeps us from getting the quality care that we need and deserve to make the best decisions for ourselves and our families. And then, of course, we have healthcare deserts all across this country that have only been exacerbated by dogs and the closure of clinics in our communities that were formerly some of the first and only places that many of us could get access to care. So all of these things together, show that it's already extremely difficult for our communities to get access to preventative reproductive health care, including birth control, and only limiting it more through, suggesting that the only ways that we should have access are through the rhythm method is absurd. I think, one of the ways that we're countering the plan of Project 2025, and this, goes beyond the introduction of this plan at all, is that, we are fighting to make birth control, for example, more accessible. We had a recent win with O-pill, which is the first type of birth control pill that is available now, today, over the counter. So go and look for it at your healthcare centers, or at your local pharmacies, your not just your healthcare centers, it's everywhere now, and retailers. So please go look for that. In doing this, we hope to overcome those barriers that our folks already face, like travel barriers and documentation barriers for immigrants and other, things that are keeping our folks from getting this care. Of course, we're always thinking about how, for many of our communities, there's a long history of reproductive coercion and oppression that has been fueled by eugenics and colonialism in our country. And so, we want to ensure that by creating access to this care, that through a coalition that has been driven by young people, that has been driven by BIPOC folks, that we are really moving to counter the kinds of coercion and control that has existed over our communities as well. And we see, availability of O-pill and hopefully other forms of birth control soon over the counter and without, the need for prescriptions as a way to regain that control. I'll just end by saying, we need policies that support our people's lives and our whole lives, including, better access to care, including immigration reform, including accessible care that doesn't just come through insurance coverage. And, we don't need policies that will keep us from having the best outcomes for our families and our communities. So, it's dangerous and scary, but I know, as I sit here with all of you, that we're fighting back, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to combat what's coming.
Thank you so much, Lupe, for making clear just how dangerous the Project 2025's anti-sex ed agenda is. So what we're hearing, right? They're coming for abortion access. They're coming for queer and trans families. They're coming for birth control. Project 2025 is also coming for specifically telemedicine abortion, which is a form of abortion care that has truly revolutionized access for many people and has been a really important tool. And of course, they want to take it away. So I want to bring in Erin Grant. They are the co-executive director of the Abortion Care Network, doing incredibly important work with independent abortion care providers all across this country who are truly on the front lines of providing abortion care throughout pregnancy and to so many disproportionately impacted communities. Erin, please help us understand their plans to take away telemedicine abortion. Who is that going to hurt and how?
Thank you so much. This is incredible. I love being with you all. And I just want to be really clear and just kind of continue to reiterate what everyone else here has already said. Project 2025 doesn't hide the ball. They are really looking at abortion, and telemedicine is just one service delivery mechanism of abortion that's available in the United States right now. But they're bold enough, as all of my colleagues have said, to state this over and over and over again. If you are not paying attention to really how dangerous, these aren't just bad ideas. These are super dangerous ideas. And when we bring up something so nitty and gritty like telemedicine, that tells me that we need to start paying attention to the narrative work and the culture work that is within the over 100 times that abortion is brought up, because it's being tied and made into an intersectional issue for us. And so I want to keep saying that the places where people can access abortion, that's hospitals, that's brick and mortar clinics, that's online. And we need deep public support to continue the fight for access to abortion. And we have to look at that language. That's how we got to that piece that Fatima brought up about Comstock law. They're not going to necessarily say that. They're going to couch it in a conversation about decency. Project 2025 is really highlighting for us, the folks that have more than hope, that we understand and that we are being seen clearly that healthcare is a part of a sustainable justice movement. Project 2025 suggests that abortion as a word can be banned, that a word can be taken out of our entire vernacular. And when we're talking about removing a word, we're talking about removing policy, laws, regulation, defunding medical practices, science, and research. People will always need access to abortion, the state didn't invent abortion. So we have a responsibility when we're talking about medication abortion specifically, or telemedicine, to really ask ourselves if it's a cure-all for our situation. And that's not what it is. I do want to say, shout out to Florida. And if you need an abortion right now, you have options. You can go to ineedana.com and you can find a provider, or you can find the assistance that you need. Abortion is important regardless of zip code, regardless of what stage in pregnancy that you're in. You should be able to access the care that you need. And we're actually seeing this telemedicine issue be a wedge. I heard somebody else say using abortion as a wedge in our community so that we can continue to hide criminalization, so that we can continue to hide surveillance. And with 60% of our country having little to no access of abortion within a drivable distance, it's good to think that we would be able to do it online, but not in a criminal circumstance, not in a place where somebody is going to be criminalized for tending to their body and tending to their pregnancy. So no person who's experiencing abortion, miscarriage, pregnancy loss should be forced to register, should be forced to sign up. That's what we're seeing when they're talking about use of telemedicine. They're talking about surveillance and taking things away. They're not actually talking about expanding access the way that we're all thinking that everyone should be able to get. Project 2025 is the result of a long history of racial capitalism, a long history of white supremacy in this country. It's where legal, medical, and social systems are all shoved into one. And honestly, LGBTQAI folks, abortion folks, we know the names of these authors. We recognize these people. These are the same people who have been using us as tests and experiments, the same people who tried to depose of leaders of abortion funds in Texas. These are not unknown names to us. We know that criminalization expands the carceral state. It makes it so that there's implications for all types of things across the country when we're talking about what is legal and what is not. What we have to continue to do is take up the narrative, the idea that there's people who deserve healthcare, that there's a good abortion, that there's bad people, that somebody is less deserving of their human rights and autonomy. We also need to call them out. They're using non-medical language. They're calling people who are forced to travel tourists for abortion. This is dehumanizing. This is not recognizing how much it is taking for us to move our families around in this country. So when I think about what telemedicine has to do, I just continue to go back to how this language and this narrative that is presented here, it says the word abortion several times, but it continues to push a ramification beyond where we can be in. I look at this plan and I think, I know we're more creative. We're more creative and more compassionate than relying on this dusty plan that actually offers zero solutions. It only offers legal access, which on the other side means criminalization. It only offers surveillance, and it only offers coercion and violence. And this is a domination game. So I just hope that we all continue to read this clearly and see the writing on the wall for what it is. Because when we all work together, every abortion clinic will be open. Everyone will be able to access the care that they need, and everyone will actually be able to see themselves in this model of healthcare. Thank you for having me tonight, and I can't wait for this conversation to continue.
Thank you so much, Erin, and the incredible work that you all are doing with ACN. So our folks out there who are with us, who are listening, who are spending your evening learning about Project 2025, I want you to take a drink of water, take a deep breath. We know this is heavy, but stick with us. We know we're laying out a lot of hard things, but we are also laying out the roadmap for resistance. And we know you do not want to miss that. So Erin just spoke to some of the barriers that are out there for folks seeking abortion care. I think that's a perfect opportunity. I want to bring up our incredible comrade, Kwajalein Jackson, who's the executive director of the Feminist Women's Health Center. I know that URGE chapters in Georgia are absolutely in love with what you all do for communities out here in the state of Georgia. So can you talk to us a little bit about what resources and support networks are available for people who are seeking abortions? There may be somebody on this call right now who needs abortion care, particularly in states with restrictive laws and bans.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kimberly. And thank you to everybody who has already set the stage so lovely. I want to encourage people to remember that we have always had abortions and we will always have abortions. I think that's one of the things that has proven itself clear and true, is that in spite of all the obstacles and roadblocks that have been put in our way, there are a vast community of people, providers, support, people who love folks who have abortions, who have been also paving a pathway to make sure that folks have access to care. So one of the things I wanted to note just off top is that in the places where abortion has been severely restricted, meaning that maybe it has been banned to the point at which fetal cardiac activity is detectable via ultrasound, which is approximately 6 weeks, but is not exactly 6 weeks. That is a very restrictive space, but that does not mean that abortion care has been eliminated. People are still having abortions in places where there are 6-week bans. So I want to say that particularly to my folks in Florida, this does not mean that you will have zero access to abortion care. But these bans absolutely leave people behind. And so the networks of people, especially those from our beloved abortion funds, they are knitting together the pathways to get people to care, whether that is helping them to travel, helping them to access resources and funding, helping them to resource around all of the other supports they need to get to care. And this network of abortion funds have existed long before the Dobbs decision, because people have always had to travel for abortion care. Abortion care has been inaccessible to so many of our communities for decades and decades. So while we are seeing an extreme, acute, sort of culmination of all of these restrictions, we have also shown our agility and our ability to evolve in the face of these restrictions to continue to get folks to care. So if you are looking for access to care and you need to travel outside of your state, if you need support in finding resources, the National Network of Abortion Funds would be the first place I would direct you to. They can help you to identify the abortion fund that supports you where you live and the abortion funds that support where you might need to go. They are helping you get practical support. So get gas, sometimes volunteers who will help you find a place to stay, childcare. We know that it's not just the cost of care in clinic that people have to contend with. It's a multitude of circumstances that people have to navigate in order to get access to care. Says, I want to make sure to shout out, Aaron also shouted them out, independent abortion providers exist in many places across the country, alongside Planned Parenthood clinics. These places are still open and are still serving patients. Even in places where abortion is banned, many of these clinics are providing comprehensive reproductive health care. They're providing gender-affirming care. They're providing birth services. They are helping to support people before an abortion and after an abortion. So I want us to remember that even in the places where we've seen the most extreme restrictions, these states cannot be left behind. We still need advocacy. These clinics still need resources and support from you. We need to continue to double and triple down our work in the places where the soil is the rockiest. That is the place where we need to dig in the hardest. So my final notes, because I know we have a lot more to get to and we don't have a lot more time, but just reminding people, find your local clinic, find your local fund, and get plugged in where you are. You don't have to just support the coasts. You can actually do the work right where you're planted.
Thank you much for speaking that, Kwajalein. At Urge, we often talk about we all deserve justice at home, right? We deserve justice in the communities and with the families and in the places that we love. Red, purple, yellow, green, it doesn't matter. Every single person in this country deserves to be treated with dignity and humanity, no matter where they live. So thank you for speaking that into the space, Kwajalein. You always bring such clarity of moral purpose. So I feel like as we've been talking kind of at the edges of this conversation, I feel like the Supreme Court has been like lurking at the periphery. I don't know about y'all, but when the Supreme Court recently started debating how many organs would have to fail before a pregnant person's life could be saved, I think I blacked out for a second. Like the ways in which our lives and our bodies and our rights are being tossed around in courtrooms is giving me a level of indigestion, let's say. So I want to bring in one of our incredible experts, Carolyn Ciccone, president of Accountable US. We need to talk about the courts. So given the connections between these dark money groups, Project 2025, and their connections to current Supreme Court justices, in some cases, these connections are in the very homes of Supreme Court justices, just pouring bad ideas into their ears. Talk to us about this Supreme Court term. What is coming? What are we up against?
Thanks so much for having me and for that question. It is certainly a dystopian universe that we are living in right now. Just want to say a couple of things, and thanks to everybody for joining and all these incredible speakers. I'm learning a lot as I sit on this call, and listen to all of everything that we're up against, but feel very inspired by all the people who are participating and ready to fight. So I'm the president of Accountable.us. We do work to shed light on the individuals and organizations that are pushing the extreme right-wing agenda that often doesn't get any scrutiny. So we try to, make sure that there is the scrutiny that they deserve. And so the work that we're doing, which we have coined Expose Project 2025, is uncovering the web of people, organizations, and donors that are leading us to that are doing the organizing around Project 2025. And so, it's many of the same players that we've been seeing for a very long time influence all of the different cases that we see before the Supreme Court for many, many years, and this term as well. Just, a few of them, Heritage is obviously at the Heritage Foundation is at its core, as well as a broad coalition of other groups. There are other groups that have been really pushing this agenda for a long time. Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, and the Alliance Defending Freedom are two of the major players. Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, has fought for a very long time to implement a nationwide abortion ban by supporting anti-choice politicians and judges. They joined the effort to overturn Roe, saying that the next steps would be restricting abortion in every state and legislature, including Congress. And the group's president has stated that her ideal candidate would support banning abortion in nearly all circumstances, including rape and incest. Leonard Leo is a name that some of you may be very familiar with, and others it might be a new name for you. He is one of the chief architects of this incredibly corrupt Supreme Court, was the head of the Federalist Society for a long time, and is truly responsible for many of the Supreme Court justices. He handpicked the Trump appointees, and now we are really we are living the consequences of his actions, and seeing the impact. Alliance Defending Freedom is another group that we have tracked very closely, that I'm sure may have come up in many of your worlds. They are first and foremost, they are a Southern Poverty Law Center designated hate group. And they do a lot of work to try to push cases before the Supreme Court and other courts, essentially representing other entities in their cases. They were integral in overturning Roe and supporting other restrictions on reproductive health care and birth control. So now, they've backed nearly a dozen of the anti-abortion legal challenges, including the mifepristone case that is pending before the Supreme Court. They also argued in front of the Supreme Court to uphold the abortion ban in Idaho, and they applauded the Alabama Supreme Court's IVF ruling. They have done a ton of work to try to roll back LGBTQ plus Americans' rights. They have been successful in front of the Supreme Court on this front. And so it's not a secret, but it is something we definitely want to talk about and expose, that ADF and other of these groups are trying to implement Project 2025. So Like you said, we should not be in a place where the Supreme Court is debating how many organs is too many to lose. And yet somehow that is where we are. And I think, yes, the dystopian world that, we all contemplated is, when you hear things like that, it feels like it is here. We should not be seeing situations where, in order to get life-saving care, you have to be airlifted outside of your state, which is, again, what we are seeing every day, and only more so. And I fear seeing things like what happened in Florida this week is only going to make that worse. This is a decades-long effort that we've seen, and that's just a smattering of the cases that we are seeing before the Supreme Court and other lower-level courts as well. So, with that, I will hand it back to you. Thank you.
All right. Well, I got to say, a lot of that sounds like a real big bummer. So we got to keep our close eye on these folks in these robes, because they're up to some really shady things. So we're now moving into the Q&A, for which we have about 5 minutes. So we're going to do just a couple questions with this incredible panel of folks who we have at our disposal with all their expertise. The first question we have is going to go to Kwajalein. So Kwajalein, despite the overturn of Roe and the Dobbs decision, the number of abortions has increased in the country. We're confused. Can you help us explain the data?
Sure. So one explanation certainly is the wide acceptance, the better understanding, and more access to medication abortion, which is certainly one of the incentives behind threatening it through the courts. But self-managed abortion is incredibly safe, and more people are talking about it. More people are sharing their experiences with it. It's being covered more thoroughly in the media. People have more access to resources to support them through it, in the form of abortion doulas, in the form of health lines, where they can get both legal and medical advice. And so that's certainly one component that is supporting people who need access to abortion care and cannot get to a brick and mortar clinic. The other mechanism I mentioned a little bit in my remarks earlier is that the abortion funds and other advocates are supporting people who are traveling for care at high numbers. I certainly don't want us to normalize the idea that people should have to travel outside of their own communities in order to access the healthcare that they need. But what we know is, in the face of clinic closures and total bans, there are robust networks of people who are supporting people to get to the care that they need across the country. New clinics are opening, and in the wake of clinics closing, people are shifting to support abortion care at later gestations in order to support people across pregnancy. So there are many, many folks who are deeply dedicated to this and are undaunted by the threats, and will continue to provide a multitude of options. So for people who want to have abortions at home, in clinic, via telemedicine, and any other mechanism that we're able to come up with in the future to make sure that folks have the safety and the care and the dignity that they deserve.
Thank you so much, Kwajalein. So our next question speaks to the political climate. There is an election in November, and folks want to know how to find candidates who support the things that they care about. So I'm going to flip this one to Nourbese in her capacity as the CEO of the All of All Action Fund. Where can folks learn more about how to identify candidates that are supportive of abortion and other important issues?
Yes. So there are two easy ways to do that. The first one, definitely check out All In Action Fund. We will be posting that information with our C4. There are other repro organizations, abortion justice organizations that also have C4s who are tracking and keeping folks accountable. And the second piece is to ask them, those are elected to work for us. And so sometimes, not even sometimes, we should just ask them where they stand on abortion access. And if we don't like the answer, we can also come back and be like, I need you to do better. They are a representative of us. And so it is important to keep asking, and I would also say demanding, for them to have a position on abortion access.
Thank you so much. Well, unfortunately, we are at time for this section. We're not closing out yet, so don't leave yet, because we have some really important calls to action. So everybody stick around. But I do just want to offer my deep thanks to this incredible panel. Y'all are out here doing this work every day. Your teams are out here doing this work every day. The organizers, the cultural creators, the advocates, really building a mass movement for abortion access and reproductive health rights and justice. So thank you all for being in the trenches every day. I'll see you on some Zooms tomorrow. But right now, I want to pass it back to Abeni, who is going to ground us in our closing and our calls to action. Abeni, you must unmute so we can hear your beautiful voice.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You rocked. Great answers. I'm walking away that we deserve justice at home. I'm walking away that this is rooted in a Christian nationalist agenda that has roots that are long. But I also am walking away while understanding the threat of Project 2025 to our reproductive rights and justice. I am inspired, and because the folks are on the ground doing the good work, I have no doubt that we have a winning team. I want to invite up my friend and colleague Jennifer Flynn Walker. Is she around?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, good stuff. So let's talk about these calls to action. You know, I did hear a question about how do we identify folks on the ground, and I know that this is the work of CPD and also our good friends at the Working Families Party, but I just wanted to open it up if you had some additional information about how we can identify folks that are on the ground that are championing our rights to be able to make decisions about our own body.
I can't really give a better answer than Nourbese did, which was to ask all of your candidates. And actually, that's a great way to engage in advocacy. So there are lists that you can get from Planned Parenthood, Action, and, Emily's list often asks this. And Working Families Party, of course, usually has a questionnaire. But if you can't get those resources for your local electeds, call them up and ask them. Write on their Facebook page and ask them. Send them an email and ask them. Go to their event when they come to your library and ask them. That's raising your hand first, fast, and high, and asking a clear question, explaining why you're interested in it, giving a little bit of your personal story. It's a form of bird dogging. It's a tried and true method of actually engaging in advocacy and getting them to move. And I have seen politicians change their mind because most of them only do what they think is the easiest. So if you can prove that you care otherwise, they might change their position on abortion access. And I want to just say really fast, abortion is healthcare. We all know that. And you know who else knows that? The writers of Project 2025. So when they came after abortion, they're not just coming after, they primarily are coming after Black and brown, queer, trans communities, but they also actually want to take away our actual healthcare too. So it's not just abortion as a piecemeal part of it, but also they're coming after the Affordable Care Act. They talk about, and this won't surprise anyone in this call, how we should have work requirements so that people can get Medicaid. They talk about weakening Medicaid and Medicare. So don't be fooled. There's so much to be scared of here. Most of us do not know what it's like to live under an authoritarian regime in this country. Many of us in this country don't know that. Thank God there are some people who can teach us, who live here. But because if the election doesn't go the right way, and there really is a difference, there's a right way and a okay way, there's a bad way and an okay way, and so we have to do everything that we can to try to make sure that people who don't endorse or support or haven't worked for candidates and then wrote Project 2025 get into office. And in particular, even though a lot of these policies are already being passed right now, it does actually matter who gets into office. We heard some resources. We heard about ineedanA.com if you need an abortion anywhere in the country. I just want to shout out Stop the Coup 2025, the volunteer-run organization that read the Mandate for Leadership, which is the policy proposal book of Project 2025, and broke it down into chapters. And they're consolidating all the resources. They were writing about it in the chat. So if you got resources, if you got events, if you want more information, go to stopthecoup2025.org. They also mentioned repealing the Comstock Amendment. And I do just want to tell everybody that if you want to get involved with CPD, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to do whatever we can to weaken this illegitimate Supreme Court. So one of the things that we can do is we can work on ways to reform the Supreme Court. It's not perfect because the court needs a lot of work, but if you would like to join our Facebook page, it is facebook.com/groups/court reformers. I'll put it into the chat, or you can simply send an email to me, jflynn@populardemocracy.org. And Abeni, I want to just announce the next call that we have coming up, which is about climate justice and how Project 2025 will, this is going to sound hyperbolic, but literally help accelerate the death of our planet. Everything that we've thought of doing to stop climate change and to bring about climate justice, they want to undo. We want to end reliance on fossil fuels. They want to double down on fossil fuels. They want to drill more. So you'll hear more about that next time, and it is May 30th at 7 p.m.
This is good time. I didn't know how we were going to be able to honor the brilliance and the genius of 13 dope women, and we did it. And so I want to shout out to Kimberly as well as Monica. Thank you guys. This is just a beautiful blessing, and be well.